including like putting tile in at people's houses on the weekends. This is when I was like board certified behavior analyst, had my like air quote big boy job. I was still doing whatever I could to possibly hustle and get some extra dollars to where I could save up, write that $5,000 check, hand it over, and say thank you. Appreciate you believing in me. Didn't work, but here's all your cash back. All right, folks, welcome back to part 2 of this Talking Aloud series where I'm answering a question from Patreon. If you're interested, the top link down below describes what Patreon is and how people support me and how I get to create more content. So what we're talking about here is this topic of career suicide, which was defined as to perform an action or partake in an activity that will totally discredit you and nullify your chance of personal advancement. And this was submitted in the context of thinking about what might happen if you try to start a company before you are ready. And so I've alluded to this on the channel, but I haven't told the full story. So excited to get this out there, see what you all think, and learn about any potential lessons that you may have all ran into as a result of this too. I think many people get into businesses and wanting to run a business or get into certain higher positions in a business because they're interested in being able to potentially influence larger contingencies and systems. What I mean by that is you might be interested in the hiring practices, the training practices. You might want to, design services and reach more and more people. And things like that, the idea of moving up the ladder, whets your appetite. To piggyback off of the first episode, as I got into these supervisory roles, I realized and kind of got a taste of that your actions can start to have ripple effects through organizations and larger systems as a result of the hard work that you do in moving up in those sort of roles. Now, for me, I never knew exactly what it was about business, but I knew that business was everywhere. I did a bit of business administration minor in undergrad. I kind of put it to the side for a couple years while going through grad school because I was so crazy, but I knew that there was going to be value in business in some sort of way. It was through kind of the combination of knowing like, there's processes and ways that you can understand business and develop them. Like it's kind of like there's task analysis out there, like there's steps that you can go follow roughly. And then that whetted appetite, right, of wanting to influence other things and really, I guess, out of 2 ways, like share behavior analysis and the possibilities, but also help people with behavior analysis. So I kind of wanted to disseminate as well as just use it in a novel sort of way. So some colleagues and I that I was working with at the time created a company. Now it took about, I would say 6 or 9 months getting to know each other, talking about, those typical conversations of like, if we could make the decisions the executives were making, if we, only had the freedom, the ability to be able to make any decision and like influence what it is that we're doing, where we're going. Those things went from casual chat in an office to semi-coherent bar conversations in which we talked about it there, to more formal planning meetings and trying to figure out how we would do this, to actually to the point to where we were figuring out how to get some funding, how to file an LLC, how to get this stuff going. The vision was that we'd pull in from our different skill sets. Behavior analysis was one area that we were interested in collectively and had different expertise in. Gifted and talented students. This was one area that one of our co-founders had, I want to say 7 or 8 years of experience in working with some of the just most brilliant, cool, quirky kids that are out there. And then self-management, which I've always talked about as like one of the best things of behavior analysis, understanding your behavior, how to measure it, how to influence the world around you, influence your own behavior, right? It's just a fascinating byproduct of behavior analysis. And so the idea is that we'd create a virtual, like online, accessible from anywhere, self-management course for gifted and talented students. Part of the reason there was obviously because of our history and backgrounds and interests, but also believing that there was a need for this based off of experience and running some small pilot sessions for over the past couple of years. I wasn't a part of that, so my colleagues did it. I partnered up with. So there's 3 of us. Now we were all employed and we were going to do this on the side. The question became, how much funds do we need? How do we move this forward? And we, the typical kind of startup thing I think with partners is you're all going to put a lot of work in. You're not going to necessarily know what that is. You're all just going to, write it out on a whiteboard each week, figure out who's the best person to do it, do as much as you possibly can. And there was competing contingencies galore. I'll get into those. That's part of the reason I think this thing failed. First of all, I want to cover the funding. So starting a business is like relatively cheap in the United States. I think it's about $600 to be able to file an LLC in the state that I live in, Nevada. You can do it for cheaper elsewhere, but we ran some numbers between that, having some money in the bank, being able to run a little bit of advertising, as well as getting some of the necessary things of emails, websites, and things up, and then a contract. It was approximately going to be like $3,000 to $4,000 for the year, just to kind of get our basic minimums covered. With all of us running a job on the side that, quite frankly, was paying good relative to most people in the world, but not great, and not like to a point that anybody had that sort of cash just sitting around, I decided that I was going to ask for a personal loan from my father to be able to get things started. This is one of those things where super nervous, hard to ask, weird to ask. It's a lot of cash to ask for, but I was just like, hey, we have this idea, we have this vision, here's the situation as to like why we're not gonna put our own money into it. Broke as hell, or a couple of the other co-founders were just having kids and making sure their priorities were straight on that front, but we really wanted to pursue it. And so I set up a limit on that, about how long it would be until I'd pay that back. And I personally was responsible for that. I made sure my co-founders were not personally responsible for that. That's a decision that I made at the time. Some people don't like to do that, make sure everybody has skin in the game. But since it was a personal thing and it wasn't like we went to a bank to get some cash, that's what I decided. Now, I'd mentioned that we had a contract drafted up. This was one of the most important things. We were working with minors. We were working with minors across states, and it came down to needing some legal experience in how those laws would work, how we could draft a contract that would work across states for the type of work that we were doing. So we actually dumped, I think, $2,000 to $5,000 into just the contract that we would have parents sign to be able to provide these services. About the other $2,000 was just for different services and things and stuff we turned on. We did a couple small like Facebook marketing things that we'd done, rented out some video equipment at one point to be able to make a couple promos, things like that, right? So at this point, nobody was making money, but we had the materials of a 4-week online course to where we would teach 1 hour per week, different areas of how to understand and influence the world around you, influence your own behavior. This was typically students that were struggling because of a number of things. Either they were just way too smart for the system that they were in, and they were just not engaged with work at school, and it was actually causing failing grades and issues at school, or there was issues at home. These issues at home were causing a lot of riff and stress for the parents and the student. And so the concept was, could you teach people that their actions are influenced by the world around them, and that they can measure, understand those, and alter those things around them. Now, this was interesting because you had to teach the parents as well as the students what was going on here, because if not, you can have some seriously manipulative behavior start to occur. So you had to kind of balance that. But also, when you're dealing with something like, you know, a really tough issue of like not doing your chores or getting failing grades with a parent in the room, like the student doesn't want to talk about that. It's embarrassing or weird. You don't have the skill sets for it. So it's this weird dynamic of being able to figure out when to work with the parents, when to work with the students, when to bring them together across that. And that's something that I was actually not personally great at. That sort of clinical chops that you need to be able to do those sort of things. But my partner was, my business partner, there was a behavior analyst, was really good at that sort of stuff. And so we spent a year roughly, him solving, you know, what is the best way to be able to do that, going through a number of pilots. And this was the tough part, is we could make socially valid outcomes for the student and for the parent. They were happy with what they were receiving. We even worked with behavior analysts' children. They would sign up for the services to be able to help work with their children. Like, it was working really well. The issue was in being able to market it effectively and be able to build strategic relationships and partnerships, be able to get stuff out there. And that's where there were some hard lessons learned in this one. The hard lessons were, I think you can have a great product that works really well, but if you don't know how to communicate it to others, you run into issues. That's the marketing, advertising side. Like we weren't converting on Facebook ads and things that I was starting to run. In hindsight, I think I know a little bit as to why that was going on, like how you on the back end target those ads and reach people. But also there was a lack of strategic partnerships. I can see why going to, you know, every single potential neurologist in town that may be contacting these sort of children, or the people that are diagnosing gifted and talented within or outside of the school systems, these medical establishments, like things like that would have been really valuable. Did I have to go like knock on everyone's doors, tell them who I was? Maybe. Could I have sent them an email? Maybe. Did we do those things? A little, but very, 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 very little. Like we really lacked in that. And that was where not having the business chops and understanding of like when you start a business, it's not necessarily that you're starting the business because you, like I said in the beginning, want to influence these larger systems. I mean, that's why you're doing it. But the reality of that day-to-day is not that you're going to be doing more and more and more of that. It's not that you're going out and delivering more services and helping more children out. What you're doing is you're doing all the things that allow you to do that. And that's the biggest lesson I learned in that business, was that in order to provide services online to gifted and talented students, I had to be responsible for, and we really had to be responsible for, doing everything else, from the contract to paying the bills, to being able to find people, to calling and getting them scheduled and organized and train them how to use just a couple things on, you know, clicking a link in an email, how to show up on time. Like all of those things were the things that really that business was about. That business was it's not that that was about, but like if you don't do those things, then you can't do the thing that you set out to do in the first place. And that's one of the themes that I communicate now and share with people, is that I really tell people to really think about if they want to start a business on their own, deliver services on their own, regardless of what it is, because it's going to be so much more work than what you think, and it's a different type of work. And so for us, being able to make that company successful was going to be a whole lot more than I thought, of marketing, networking, resources to travel around, meet people, learning the culture of gifted and talented. I was starting to do that online, but like really in hindsight, if we'd all collectively maybe spent an extra 12 or 24 months learning the space, building connections and trying to start it up that way, we probably could have made our money go further and had more success. Ultimately, what we ran into was this realization, like I said, of the world of business isn't necessarily just delivering more services and helping more people. It's all the things that come with the business. And then your cash supply is going to be limited, and at some point you're going to run out and you have to decide. I remember we ran out of cash, or we were predicting we were going to be running out of cash for the minimal bills that we had. I'm talking about 250, 300 bucks a month of things. Is all we had to do, and we ran it out, and it was, you know, another 4 or 6 months we're going to run out of the little bit of cash that we had. And it came down to a really tough conversation of, you know, is this something that we put all of our cash into more, or is this something that we fold? And we all didn't agree on what we should be doing. And it was a tough point for me, but what I personally stood for in that founders discussion was that I'd already taken out a personal loan of $5,000. That money had gone into an idea, belief that we all believed in. The return wasn't there yet, and dumping more money into that wasn't going to be worth the time. I didn't want to put any more of my own time, personal cash, nor ask for or put myself out there for more things I was going to be personally tied to. People understood that, but it's weird when you're saying that I don't believe in this thing that we've been working on anymore for the last 18 to 24 months as a collective group, and it alters relationships with people. As a result of that, the two co-founders and I are in good standing, I would say. Like, we talk to each other occasionally, but we went from hanging out multiple times a week to no longer interacting. We're all in the same valley. We're all in the same area. We're all 15 to 20 minutes of a drive from each other. So that was the biggest loss that I had out of that, was, and it wasn't like he said, she said, pointing fingers at anything. Like, we weren't upset with each other. It was just disheartening. It was sad that that's where it had come to. And those things altered the other things, because that's kind of what we were there for. Like we were all friends, but we're also co-founders and trying to go for this thing. So it alters the motivation to be able to hang out and keep in touch when you have a really hard failure there. Now, that said, there's like a personal part of that I always have to share on this conversation, which is I could always do more on that. I think like I could rekindle or pick that back up, and that's something that, I don't know, you choose where you're going to spend your time each day. I've been putting a ton of time into this company, actually, partially because I knew how much work it was going to take off of that failure to be able to make this one work. And I've been really heads down on that the last 2 years, 3 years or so. But yeah, that's part of it. Now, I will say out of this, some lessons learned, things that were useful to me. First of all, those, I'd say, scars from having a business that ended up folding in ways has actually gotten me a lot further in business relationships with people, because I don't know, other business co-founders and CEOs, like they like to know that you've gone through those harder conversations and things. There's a lot of potential where that sort of failure could cause me issues down the road. So when we're talking about the theme here, failing at that business, if I was going to try to do another gifted and talented service, that track record's there, right? It's going to make people question me. I wouldn't be able to authentically start that without having that somewhere disclosed, right? When it came to things like the co-founding of On Location, working with my business partner there, the online education model that we're building, that was a conversation that I had up front, disclosing like, here's my business track record history, here's what I've done, and in a way, here's the lessons I learned from it, and why I do what I do now. And so, I don't know, you carry that history with you. It can run into issues. I really try to look for the good, and I think, if anything, that's just helped me in business, having that loss from the conversations with others and people kind of appreciating that you've gone through those tougher parts of business, but also just knowing how to make better decisions of what you're getting into in the future. And so I don't think it's limited me in any sort of way yet, but time will tell. You'll see. We'll all see. I don't know. The big thing that came from that I was personally satisfied about was that $5,000 that I borrowed from my father. Remember I said that we were all working a job that didn't pay super well. I ended up taking about 12 to 14 months, going head down, working side jobs, including like putting tile in at people's houses on the weekends. This is when I was like board certified behavior analyst, had my like air quote big boy job. I was still doing whatever I could to possibly hustle and get some extra dollars to where I could save up, write that $5,000 check, hand it over, and say thank you. Appreciate you believing in me. Didn't work, but here's all your cash back. And luckily, he didn't charge me interest on that. But it was so rewarding to be able to write that check and be like, thanks for believing in me. Here's your cash back. And not going to bed stressing about potentially losing somebody else's cash. So part of the reason I always self-fund things now is because of that pressure, because of that lesson. I hope this is useful for somebody that's maybe considering things out there. You'll find me championing all the time, like really think about, if you want to start a business, what is the business going to be about? What's your day-to-day going to be about? What are your reinforcers? And do they line up with the business side? Because you might just want to be a really awesome clinician. You might just want to be somebody in a business that's really carrying out the mission, regardless of what that is. It might not be the business that you want to start. I found out I like businesses of just me or small partners, and that I like really clean contractual things that are not ongoing forever. I like this, right now at least, this idea of we have a contract, we have a project, we're gonna work on this project. It might be 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, but there's a hard start and end date. It's not this ongoing thing. And that seemed to be working out for me. So if anybody has any stories like that, love to hear them. You can DM if you want them private. I'm uploading this while I'm off grid, so I'll check everything when I get back, spend some time in the mountains, and look forward to sharing in part 3 here soon. I'll see you later. That's your Talking Loud, super long Daily BA episode.